I am extremely happy to be here and grateful to Sri Chakrapani for his very kind invitation to me. I think this is a very fine initiative of the Center for Innovation in Public Systems and very gracious of the Aravind Eye Care System to host this workshop. It is the coming together of two important institutions, and I hope that this is only the first of many such interactions. I do not have very much to say to you. All of you are professional people and you have a detailed and very intensive workshop ahead of you. But there are just a few issues to which I would like to call attention and which I would like to place as the context within which you have your discussions. All the three speakers before me have referred to the fact that public systems have to work. And I think that is an extremely important assertion. We have in India numerous examples of outstanding initiative performance in the private sector, in the non-governmental sector, in the non-profit sector, in the charitable sector. I have no doubt that the Aravind Eye Care System represents some of all these elements. There are extremely successful and worthwhile experiments in the public-private partnership mode. But there are, comparatively speaking, relatively few examples of outstanding successes which are entirely in the public sector. And one of the earlier speakers referred to constraints. Yes, indeed, there are constraints in the public sector, but equally there are also resources. There are constraints of various sorts, but the constraints derive essentially from the fact that public systems use public money, and wherever the use of public funds is involved, there is the requirement that due diligence is maintained. However, the fact remains that, at least not in my immediate recollection, I cannot think of what I would call outstanding and continued success being shown by institutions which are entirely in the government sector. There have been many institutions that have had moments of glory. There have been many institutions that have shown quite impressive performance over a limited period of time. But on a sustained basis, it is hard to think of institutions, and that is where this meeting becomes important, because I hope these are the issues you will discuss. So how do you make a difference in the government? Because let us be in no doubt about this. Whatever the remarkable achievements of activities outside government, we are only going to be able to make an impact if there are results flowing from public institutions. As I'm always fond of saying in meetings like this, public health is a public responsibility. And we should never forget that. And it will never do to take the line that, no, this is the natural limit to which a government institution can perform. But we cannot really perform better than this. That if we achieve some 60-65% performance, this is fine. Because after all, we are government. And that, I think, is a very wrong attitude. The threshold has to be substantially higher. It has to be at least as high as in any other institution in the country. And that, I think that is a lesson that all of us who work for government and for all of us who believe in government, this is a lesson we have to keep. Specifically in the health sector, the big issue in debate at this point of time is the question of universal access to health. Now, universal access means different things to different people. And I'm not sure there is consensus within government on what universal access means. But as a working definition, I think we can assume that it means that most healthcare requirements of most people are met through public systems at all times. In our sector, we can say that by and large, that if the primary and secondary levels of care are fully functioning and are serving all the healthcare requirements of all the people all the time. Tertiary care is a different matter altogether, but primary and secondary care are being met free of cost. That is what universal access means. Now, very few countries have had success in achieving the goals of universal access. Very few developing countries. This is the big issue, and all of you as people in public health should also reflect on this issue. What does universal access mean, and what will it mean for you when you're back at your jobs, when you're in the field? How do you translate the objectives of universal access into what you do? So that again, I would like you to keep that in mind. And that is also relevant because many of you come from states that are much more poorly endowed than Tamil Nadu is. There are several states here where there are primary health centers without doctors. There are district hospitals possibly with one ophthalmologist who is operating out of some small facilities that were made available a long time ago. I would like those of you from other states to visit some of the public facilities in this state just to get a sense of what can happen in government. Tamil Nadu is lucky because for two reasons. One is that they have always, and for a very long time now, had a very strong and robust public health administration in addition to hospital administration. And the other reason is Tamil Nadu has been quick off the mark in establishing government medical colleges and government nursing colleges, which other states have not done. The result is clear for us to see. You now find doctors in government hospitals, which you do not find in other states. So this is a huge advantage. But then the lesson now, this is where the need for innovation comes in. What happens in states that are more poorly endowed, that do not have doctors, that do not have nurses? Yesterday in the course of we were visiting various projects to do with the district mental health program. Tamil Nadu in that field also has, a more than adequate number of psychiatric nurses, psychiatric social workers, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, which is what is required under the district mental health program. Very few other states can match that degree of resources. But the question there again is, what do you do in those states where you don't have the health professionals? And that is something that I think you should think about here. What happens to those of you who are going back to UP or to Jharkhand or to Chhattisgarh or to Uttarakhand, where this sort of backup is not available? It's not just the ophthalmologist or the surgeon, it's the optometrists and the technicians and the optical assistants, whatever you call them. It is the whole range of supporting staff that are essential to a strong and viable eye care system. What do you do when you don't have them? What do you do in the short term at least? Maybe in the medium term and the long term we can plan for those things to happen. But what do you do now? I'm not sure I have an answer, which is why I'd like to know what this group thinks. Because that is an important question. And maybe there are lessons to learn from eye care which can then be modified and applied to other areas of care as well. Because what we are looking for is a sort of model. And then we need to see how can the model be tweaked and applied in other sectors as well. So I hope very much that that these are the sorts of issues you will talk about. I hope again that you will learn and you will be able to take back to your states something of what you've learned. I hope there will be the occasion for learning from each other, not just learning from the Aravind system, but from experiences in your states. And once again, my thanks to both to Sri Chakrapani and to friends at the Aravind system for inviting me today. My good wishes for a very successful workshop. Thank you.